The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
So we had a big discussion on the regular show today about good and bad critiques of Medicare for All and being prepared to address critiques and identify which are likely to be good faith critiques or bad faith critiques. But there's a whole other sort of parallel story to our healthcare system that is discussed a lot less than the cost to the consumer and the decisions that consumers are forced into making as a result of what healthcare costs, which is that our system is also generating a crazy amount of burnout to healthcare workers. We're talking about both doctors and nurses. And there's a report from the National Academy of Medicine that found that half of the country's doctors and nurses are experiencing a significant amount of burnout. And this is also bad for patients. So, there are people who are kind of flippantly reacting to this and saying, oh, the well-paid doctors and nurses are tired of working. Wah. It's not, that's a crazy way to respond, by the way, but also, it's also about how that affects care. When doctors and nurses are burnt out, malpractice claims go up, medical errors go up, absenteeism goes up, which means that fewer doctors and nurses are covering more patients, which is not good because people are spread thinner. This is a real issue, Pat, and we shouldn't be writing it off.
And that's where that advice comes from, that if you're a patient and you're visiting your doctor, you should try to make that appointment in the morning because they're less likely to be burnt out in the morning. And this is a big cost of the system. It's an estimated $4.6 billion a year. And that is because many of these doctors, to deal with the burnout, they're reducing their hours. Maybe they decide to leave medicine entirely. And I wonder, when we discuss Medicare for All, if doctors are by and large in support of Medicare for All, because that would maybe lower their compensation, but I think overall make their lives much easier because they wouldn't have to deal with the billing processes, less paperwork, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's not clear listen, that's one of the things you have to understand. A lot of those are question marks, and we don't necessarily have fixed answers for those, because if you have, for example, a single payer system, a lot of the reimbursement infrastructure still exists, right? It's that it's all coming from one payer, which is the government, rather than from different insurance companies. So some of that bureaucracy goes away with single payer, but not all of it. And that's an important thing that we need to be keeping in mind when we talk about these proposals. So yes, along the list of things that are contributing to this, there are shortages in some areas. I believe that there are shortages. I mentioned dermatology. I believe that PCP there is a shortage of. I think the normal panel for a PCP, I'm trying to think now, is it supposed to be 2,000 and some PCPs have 2,500 or 3,000 patients on their panel? Or is it supposed to be less and it has swelled to 2,000 because of shortages? I don't remember exactly, but for me, what's depressing about this, without just focusing on the minutia, is that our system is broken in so many ways. It's broken in terms of what healthcare costs. It's broken in terms of access. It's broken in terms of who gets to make decisions about what counts as medically necessary care. It's also broken in terms of the providers at the human level, and there's so much to fix here, Pat, and a lot of this relates to how healthcare is paid for, but some of this stuff is cultural, and there are other considerations as well.
Yeah, and there are definitely good ideas on the table for how to deal with doctor burnout. That those include having like a wellness monitor or just better training, but maybe making sure that doctors and nurses are better prepared for burnout when they're going into medicine, when they're learning about this stuff in schools, and also like developing these agencies that would allow doctors to seek help without worrying about facing medical malpractice lawsuits, that sort of thing. But all of those solutions just seem like band-aids on a bigger problem. Like even if we were to institute all of those solutions, I don't think it would largely solve much.
No, it would only be dealing with some of the outward symptoms, and I think most people who watch this show understand that these are bigger systemic problems that need to be solved. But I know a lot of doctors who are burnt out, and in fact, one that I know right now is taking a 6-month sabbatical because he's so burnt out and is not even in the U.S. and is doing something completely different. And I completely understand that. There is a big controversy. Joe Rogan even was tweeting about this, and we need to basically diffuse the controversy around this. Big news was made because of a Massachusetts state legislator who took up a proposal to ban the word bitch within the state of Massachusetts, or the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, as some of us know it. And no vote is scheduled until February. No action has been taken. And this immediately blew up, where all sorts of people were saying, oh my goodness, this is the left-wing language policing. You are going to start legislating speech. This is what Jordan Peterson was talking about. And what people need to understand is that a constituent made a request that a bill be filed. In Massachusetts, there's a process where constituents go to their legislator and they say, I want you to file this bill. In this case, a Takia White of Dorchester, Massachusetts, went to Congressman Hunt and said, please file this. Congressman Hunt filed it, and that's it. And it's not going to go anywhere. Nothing's going to happen. This is a process that exists in Massachusetts for representation. And, people outside of the state, Pat, who don't seem to understand how this works, are acting like this is government suppression of speech. Like, this is going nowhere. This is something that was requested. It was filed. Congressman Hunt did what they were supposed to do. And that's probably the last we're going to hear of it.
Yeah, it's not a great idea for a bill. It's not great legislation, but at the very least, it sounds like these representatives in the Massachusetts state legislature are at least representing their citizens. They want to hear from their citizens, and they're at least willing to put, suggestions that citizens make on the table to actually have a vote on them, or even just to move forward through it with the legislative process. And I think that at least is good, that there's some representation there. But yeah, I mean, I guess if there's any criticisms to be made, it's against the person that actually decided that they wanted to have this bill filed, if they want to have this go through the legislative process. Or I guess you could put it on Congressman Hunt. I mean, could he have just not put the thing forward altogether and stuff?
I'm not sure about that.
Away?
I mean, a lot of the criticism is going at Congressman Hunt, and people are saying, this guy, what I read one quote that was, thank goodness this guy's not a heart surgeon and just a politician, because imagine if this guy's this much of an idiot, the amount of damage he could do if he was a heart surgeon. I think that it is, if not by law, by tradition, that when there is a specific request for legislation, that members of the Massachusetts state legislature, they put something down in writing, and that's it. But I think that the attacks on Congressman Hunt are outrageous. And yeah, I am not supportive of this bill, to be clear. I think that this bill is a terrible idea. It's just a bill that was filed to appease a constituent, and it's going nowhere. And unfortunately, it's getting a ton of attention, which it should not.
Yeah, and I think if this bill was filed 10, 20 years ago, it wouldn't be much of a news story because people would realize that it's not going anywhere. People would just maybe get a laugh out of it. But now, because of all the free speech warrior stuff going on and the censorship wars and this idea that the left is trying to police speech, you're able to make hay out of a story like this, and the right can run with it, and everyone can have their take on it. So I think that does just have to do with the times that we're living in right now.
I tweeted back to Joe Rogan when he posted about it and just said something basically like, yeah, listen, you just did this is going nowhere. This is just a process that exists in Massachusetts, and it's just like it's stupid, but it's going nowhere, and that's it. And hopefully it'll tone down some of the there's so many more important, there's actual like real concerning stuff going on with bills. Like there was another one of these anti-abortion heartbeat bills that I forget in what state it is. It might have been South Carolina or Georgia, where they have removed language for exceptions for like the health of the mother, rape and incest. That could pass. That's serious. That's a real attack. A piece of paper saying ban the word bitch that is not even going to be discussed in any serious way. It's just not the issue, and it doesn't deserve attention. Interesting story in Georgia as we are getting closer to Halloween, for which I will be doing nothing. A group of registered sex offenders is now suing a county sheriff's office because the county sheriff's office showed up and put signs in their front yards saying, do not trick or treat here. County Sheriff Gary Long's office put these big white signs in the lawns of sex offenders last Halloween and plan to do it again this year. But there is now a federal class action lawsuit that has been filed. The posters say, warning, no trick-or-treaters at this address. A community safety message from County Sheriff Gary Long. And the sex offenders say that they were humiliated and embarrassed and that these are unlawful and invalid. It's unclear whether that's true, but it is still possible that they may be able to prevail legally. What do you think about this, Pat? The information about where sex offenders live is available if one wants to search for it. Is it practical and realistic for parents to do a full search of every house along the route or something like that in advance. I don't know. Maybe this is a good idea. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's stigmatizing those individuals. It's going to hurt their possibility of getting or maintaining jobs. I don't know.
Well, I'm definitely opposed to this move, but I'm also opposed to the sex offender registry altogether. So that kind of explains that. I suppose to steelman their argument, the state does give the sheriff the authority to publicize the names of sex offenders, give out their addresses, and even photographs. So it's not like it's that is it that much of an extra step to like put signs on their yards? I suppose like a conversation about property rights comes in, because if the residents of the property want to take down those signs, they could be in violation of the law, and that seems as if the government is infringing on their private property rights. So there's definitely a lot here, but from all angles, I'm against this.
Yeah, I've spoken out before, and I made a very narrow case against the sex offender registry as it currently exists. Well, we don't have to rehash that. But that being said, I do think that this may be legal, although it could be a question of property rights as to whether you can really put the signs on the front lawns when that is, presumably not property. It's property under the purview of the owners, not of the county sheriff's office. If you had to guess, though, Pat, what do you think will be the result of the case here?
I don't know. I really don't know. I can only hope, like whenever you're trying to predict what the judges are going to decide, it's political. It shouldn't be political. We should have this totally apolitical process for how we get judges into the courts. But we know that oftentimes they're elected, or oftentimes they're appointed by Republican governors in states like Georgia. So I wouldn't be totally surprised if they decide to side with the sheriff here.
I don't disagree either. I think that it's quite possible that they will side with the sheriffs here. And in general, in society, there is, sometimes for good reason, sometimes it goes too far, there is a pretty significant lack of empathy for sex offenders. I'm not saying we should be empathizing with their offenses. I want to be really, really clear here. But there is more, it's sort of more acceptable to go above and beyond in the dehumanization of sex offenders than it often is with others. And I understand why that would be. But this may be one of those cases in which it results in the court ultimately siding with the sheriffs over the sex offenders. We will see. We will follow it and see what ultimately happens here. As far as Halloween goes, I'm just so done with Halloween. I just don't care about it. What's your take on it at this point?
It's one of the best holidays, I think. You get to dress up. You get to be something that you're not.
Oh, geez.
You get to, be in disguise if you want to be in disguise. You can go to house parties. You can go out to bars and violate their dress code.
Right.
Because you have this special thing where it's Halloween. You get to do those things. I'm all for it. And I haven't picked out my costume yet, but you'll all hear about it. That's for sure. I'm going to have to disclose what my costume is pretty soon, I think.
I also haven't picked out my costume, and I don't know that I'm going to be wearing one. In fact, I've got a full day of meetings on Halloween. It's a Thursday, right? Yeah, it's a week
Yeah, it's
from
next
today.
Thursday.
Next Thursday. I guess a lot of the Halloween parties will probably be Friday, November 1st, right?
Maybe. Or I think they're usually before Halloween, so maybe. Well, Thursday night's sometimes a party day too, Thirsty Thursdays. So it'll probably be a mix of that Thursday and maybe the following Friday. Yeah.
There you go. Well, anyway, I will keep people apprised of whether any costumes surface. My dad apparently is going to a Halloween party, and my stepmom got him a Ghostbusters jacket from like the original Ghostbusters movie, and with like patches with the different names. I encouraged him to put the Venkman patch on his Ghostbusters thing, but yeah, I don't know. Is it lame that I don't care about Halloween anymore?
Yeah, it's lame, but you have every right to not care about it.
All right, very good. That does it for today. We will have a new show and Pat's bonus show coming up tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.